The film opens with a young Chinese girl named Wei sketching a flower she discovered in her father's journal. Her father explains that it's known as a corpse flower, which emits a foul odor to lure flies. It's also evident that both Wei and her father bear an unusual scar on their faces, seemingly inherited. As a scientist, her father expresses his determination to develop something that could heal their scars. Later, he gathers a serum he has formulated into a vial and injects it into a piece of animal hide. He applies the treated skin to his scar, which astonishingly starts to mend. Overjoyed, he believes the experiment is a success. However, moments later, the patch begins to grow uncontrollably, nearly engulfing his entire face. Gasping for air, he attempts to remove it with a scalpel, but the tissue rapidly regenerates. A horrified Wei tries to intervene by repeatedly stabbing the growth, but tragically, her father succumbs. Fast forward several years, and Wei is now a teenager deeply interested in science, having earned a scholarship to a renowned university in New Zealand. Upon arriving in the country, Wei is greeted by her Aunt Ling, who is delighted to reunite with her niece and invites her to stay. On the drive home, Aunt Ling shares that her husband has left her, and she now lives with her daughter, Angela. When they get home, Wei meets Angela, instantly noticing her beauty. Aunt Ling remarks that Wei might positively influence her cousin, who has lost touch with her heritage and can't even speak basic Chinese. Wei settles into her new surroundings, creating a small memorial for her late father and offering him New Zealand delicacies. The next day, Wei arrives for her first day at university and asks a homeless, disfigured man named John for directions to the science building. He kindly assists her. Later, Wei attends a lecture by Professor Paul. She sits alone at the back while Angela sits up front with her popular friends, Eve and Jasmine. Paul distributes the test results, announcing that Wei is the only one who scored a perfect 100%, an impressive feat. He also mentions he's looking for a lab assistant and invites interested students to apply. Afterward, Wei heads to the science lab and retrieves her father's old notebook to study. At that moment, Paul enters, inquiring about the notebook written in Chinese. Wei shyly explains it belonged to her father and that she's trying to continue his research. Recognizing her potential, Paul offers her a position as his lab assistant. He assures her that if she performs well, he'll allow her to conduct experiments, which Wei gladly accepts. In another scene, Angela brings her friends home, where they mock Wei's shrine. They're startled by her father's scar, and Angela reveals that Wei has a similar one, which is why she always wears a scarf. They explore her room, discovering various pictures of dissected animals and insects. This unnerves the girls, prompting them to leave. Later, as Wei returns home, she joins them while they watch a movie. However, the trio seems uneasy around her and eventually leaves, leaving Wei by herself. In another part of the story, Paul receives an email from the research board informing him that his funding will be cut unless he achieves a major breakthrough within 2 weeks. The next day, after classes, Wei notices Angela and her friends spending time together, which makes her feel envious. She awkwardly approaches them and invites them to try some traditional Chinese dishes her father loved. Hesitantly, the girls agree. However, during the meal, Angela appears visibly uncomfortable. She declines to eat anything, while Wei starts eating chicken fingers with her bare hands. This repulses the girls, prompting Angela and Eve to leave without touching the food. Jasmine eats a little, but soon follows her friends. On her way home, Wei briefly talks to John and shows him her scars. She recalls her mother once saying their ancestors might have done something wrong, which is why she feels unattractive. John reassures her, insisting she's beautiful. Later, Paul offers Wei a ride home and expresses his desire to focus on her research. He believes they can achieve something extraordinary if they collaborate. Back at home, Wei excitedly shares the news with a picture of her late father. She hears noises coming from Angela's room and peeks inside, only to discover her cousin with her boyfriend, Josh. Angela's dog notices Wei and starts barking aggressively, alerting Angela to her presence. Furious, Angela scolds Wei, telling her to stay away from her both at college and at home. She also complains about the smell of incense and spoiled food in the house, deeply hurting Wei's feelings. The next morning, Wei and Paul examine her father's formula and realize it's missing a crucial element, a binding agent to fuse skin tissue. They conduct numerous experiments to identify the right agent, but all attempts fail. As days pass, their lack of progress frustrates Paul, and he begins taking out his anger on Wei. One day, Jasmine enters the lab and asks Paul if he still needs an assistant. To everyone's surprise, he says yes and hands her a form to sign. On their way home, Jasmine apologizes to Wei, clarifying that she didn't mean to take her place. She empathizes with Wei's struggles to fit in and suggests they support each other. This lifts Wei's spirits, but her attention shifts when she sees a brochure about corpse flowers, reminding her of her childhood. That night, a determined Wei sneaks into an exhibition featuring a rare corpse flower and extracts some of its fluid. Back at the lab, she uses the substance as the missing binding agent to complete the formula. Meanwhile, we learn that Paul and Eve are having an affair, but they're interrupted by noises in the lab. Paul is surprised to find his former lab assistant there. Wei removes a patch of skin from her thigh and replaces it with animal skin treated with her new formula. To her amazement, her skin begins to heal instantly, confirming the experiment's success. Moments later, Paul approaches her, and Wei excitedly shows him her healed thigh as proof. Eve misinterprets the situation and snaps a photo. Eve then enters the room and pulls Wei away, claiming it's time for a girls' night out. Alone, Paul notices Wei left her father's notebook behind and calls a friend to help translate the Chinese text. Meanwhile, Eve sends a photo to Angela, who becomes enraged. Angela rushes home to confront her cousin. On the other hand, Eve takes Wei to a remote area and warns her against pursuing a relationship with a professor for better grades. Wei denies the accusation, but Eve refuses to believe her. She drives off, leaving Wei stranded in an isolated location. After walking for hours, Wei finally returns home, only to find Angela waiting angrily. She discovers her shrine has been destroyed and panics, fearing their ancestors will curse them. Unmoved, Angela attacks Wei, attempting to choke her. In a moment of self-defense, Wei strikes Angela with a nearby chopstick, leading to Angela's death. Overwhelmed with guilt, Wei tries frantically to revive her but fails. Desperate, she drags the body into the bathroom and devises a sinister plan. After removing the chopstick, Wei cuts a section of her own facial skin and also slices a layer from Angela's face, injecting it with the experimental substance. She then applies Angela's skin to her own face, enduring an excruciating transformation. When it's over, Wei is stunned to find that she now looks exactly like Angela. Her scar has vanished. Moments later, Aunt Ling returns home, and Wei pretends to be Angela. The unsuspecting woman embraces her, completely unaware that her daughter's lifeless body lies hidden beneath the bed. Later, Wei studies videos of Angela to mimic her behavior when Aunt Ling knocks on her door. She's leaving for a work trip for a week and apologizes to her daughter for always being so preoccupied. The next day, Wei arrives at school posing as Angela, experiencing what it's like to be the center of attention. After class, she hangs out with Eve and Jasmine, neither of whom suspects anything. In the afternoon, Josh picks her up, and they head to a secluded forest for a picnic. Wei feels ecstatic, having never experienced romance before. However, Angela's face suddenly detaches and lands on Josh. Panicked, Josh stumbles backward and accidentally falls off a cliff to his death. Horrified by the incident, Wei rushes home in search of her father's notebook, but can't find it anywhere. She realizes it's with Paul, but he doesn't answer her calls. Meanwhile, Paul researches Wei's father online and studies the notebook, discovering a sketch of the corpse flower and deducing its role in the formula. On her end, Wei uses the remaining substance to reattach Angela's face to her own but becomes anxious as the supply dwindles. Later, Paul visits the corpse flower exhibit to collect some of its decaying parts. Meanwhile, Wei arrives at the lab and desperately searches for the notebook, but comes up empty-handed. She calls Paul again, but he claims the notebook has disappeared. He coldly reminds her that her work is complete and, as the lead scientist, the research belongs to him. Enraged, Wei steals some materials from the lab before storming out. The next day, Wei and Eve go shopping and return to Wei's place for a sleepover. During this time, Eve notices a strange odor in the house, but Wei brushes it off, claiming it's from Angela's belongings. As Angela's skin begins deteriorating, Eve grows increasingly uneasy and attempts to leave. Wei, however, insists she has a surprise upstairs. Suddenly, Wei attacks, causing Eve to flee in terror. The frightened girl hides in a nearby pond, submerging herself to stay concealed. But Wei detects her presence and uses a power drill to fatally injure her. Wei drags Eve's body back inside and proceeds to peel off both her own face and Eve's. The following day, Wei transforms into Eve, even dyeing her hair blonde to complete the disguise. 2 police officers arrive at the house searching for Angela, but Wei claims she isn't there. The officers conduct a quick inspection but find nothing suspicious and leave. Later, Wei heads to college, where concerned Jasmine confides that Angela hasn't been answering her calls and Josh has been found dead. Wei also notices several officers nearby investigating Angela's disappearance. That night, Wei dismembers the bodies, places them in plastic bags, and disposes of them in the pond. To further cover her tracks, Wei sends a message from a fake account to the university, accusing Paul of having an inappropriate relationship with a student and attaching a photo of herself with him. The next day, Paul is fired, and his reputation is destroyed. Wei visits his home, hoping to retrieve the notebook, but Paul, frustrated and bitter, orders her to leave. Later, Paul experiments with the substance, successfully blending 2 pieces of skin seamlessly. Thrilled by his breakthrough, he sends a voice message to Eve, inviting her over to celebrate. Shortly after, Wei arrives at Paul's house and observes him opening a hidden compartment in the liquor cabinet. He retrieves some drugs and heads to another room to prepare drinks. Seizing the opportunity, Wei inspects the compartment and discovers a vial of the substance, which she promptly steals. Noticing her skin beginning to peel, Wei feigns a headache and hurries out of the house. Later, Paul reflects on her odd behavior and checks the compartment, only to discover the missing vial. Realizing the visitor was Wei disguised as Eve, he becomes alarmed. Meanwhile, Wei returns home and painfully removes Eve's skin from her face. Jasmine soon arrives, taken aback by Wei's battered face and the fact that she's wearing Eve's dress. The kind-hearted Jasmine consoles her, reassuring her that everything will be all right. She then invites Wei to stay with her for the night, an offer Wei accepts. However, as Jasmine opens the refrigerator, she discovers several dismembered body parts just as Wei fatally suffocates her. Overcome with remorse, Wei reflects on how Jasmine was the only person who had ever shown her kindness. Not long after, Paul shows up at the house and finds Wei huddled in a dark room. Wei expresses her disbelief that he uncovered her identity, to which Paul arrogantly replies that while it took her years to solve the mystery, he managed it in just one afternoon. Wei screams that the work belonged to her father, but Paul remains indifferent, declaring that he will achieve fame through the discovery. He demands to know where the vial is, and Wei tells him it's in the fridge. What happens next? Later, Paul wakes up tied to a table, his neck grotesquely mutilated. Wei places a piece of meat into the wound and injects the substance directly into it. An elderly neighbor hears his cries as his skin begins to regenerate at an alarming rate, much like what happened to Wei's father. The rapidly growing tissue soon covers his mouth and nose, prompting Wei to shove a straw through his mouth to prolong his suffering. Shortly after, the horrified neighbor arrives, witnesses the macabre scene, and flees the house to call the authorities. Realizing she's been caught, Wei grabs some belongings, takes the vial of the substance, and rushes out. She sprints desperately through the town, but the police quickly spot her and begin chasing her on foot. Wei eventually reaches an underground subway station, where she encounters the homeless man, John. Begging him to hide her under his blanket, she accidentally crushes the vial while concealing herself. The spilled substance merges her wound with John's body, creating a monstrous fusion. The story then jumps forward in time, revealing that Wei is still missing and is wanted for multiple murders. The bodies of Angela, Eve, and Jasmine are found, while Paul remains hospitalized in critical condition. Aunt Ling, devastated by her daughter's death, later spots someone on the street and calls out, mistaking them for Wei, but it turns out to be a stranger. Before the film concludes, she notices a grotesquely deformed figure nearby and flees in terror. It is revealed to be the horrifying fusion of John and Wei, their distorted forms marked by misplaced mouths, teeth, and fingers. And that was the story of this film. What did you think about it? Let us know in the comments.